Welcome back. I'm reading the second half of Chapter 2, Accidental Yet Unexplainable. Commander Neuters gulped fearfully and turned to Connor. There are creatures that turn others into stone in the land of stories, he asked. It didn't come from the fairy tale world, Connor said. It must have been a character my uncle recruited for using the portal potion. I just don't know which story it's from. Does it have to be from literature? Beau Rogers asked. If I didn't know any better, I would say you were talking about Medusa from Greek mythology. What's a Medusa? Peter Pan asked. She's a horrible monster, Beau Rogers animatedly replied. Legend says she has long, scaly body, fangs, and snakes for hair. Just one gaze into her red eyes will turn you into stone. The lost boys cover their eyes, ears, and mouths at the young archaeologist's frightening description. The blissworm clapped its tiny hands together, anxious to meet her. Don't worry, lads, Robin Hood said. I've courted many a maiden who turned out to be far worse. With just a few verses of a romantic poem, she will be putty in my hands. The Prince of Thieves didn't make anyone feel better about the situation, especially Connor. He got to his feet and started pacing around the room. A very difficult decision had to be made, and Connor couldn't delay it a moment longer. We can't waste any more time, he said. Tomorrow we're going to fight the literary army and reclaim the fairy tale world. I never thought we'd have to do it without my sister, but we can't let the people suffer any longer. Poor Alex, Red said. There have been many times I've disappeared for some me time, but I always returned after a couple of hours. I hope she'll resurface in time to help us. She put so much work into recruiting our army, it'd be a shame if she missed the war completely. Suddenly, Goldilocks' face lit up with an idea. Red's nonsense always had a funny way of putting things into perspective for her. Hold your horses, Goldilocks said. Which horses? The Tin Woodman asked. No, it's a figure of speech, Goldilocks said, and got back to her point. We've been looking at the literary army and at Alex's disappearance like they're separate situations. But what if they're more related than we think? After all, we're at war. A war Alex is a key player in. It's very possible someone is using Alex to sabotage us. Perhaps it's time we stop asking where Alex went and start asking who took her. Of all the directions Connor's mind had gone in the last week, this was the conclusion he had never come to. His sister was so powerful and strong-minded, it was hard to imagine that someone could abduct her from the hospital without anyone noticing, especially someone from the literary army. They couldn't have taken Alex, Connor said. Even if the literary army knew we existed, they have no way of accessing the other world. Besides, I think one of us would have noticed a card soldier or a flying monkey walking around. I didn't say it was the literary army, Goldilocks said. In times of conflict, there's always the enemy you know and the enemy you don't. Like the literary army may be the one who we're up against, but who is the third party we're forgetting to consider? Who else would benefit if either of our armies was defeated? The whole commissary went quiet as all the characters thought it over. It was highly likely that they were leaving someone out of their equation, but who could it be? Who or what was just as invested in the upcoming war as they were? Who was that at that very moment was also assembling a secret and forming plans to dominate the fairy tale world? The answer hit Bree like a lightning bolt. The realization made her gasp so loudly all the characters jumped. I know, she said. We're forgetting about the witches. We know they have access to the other world because one of them kidnapped Emmerich using the portal at New Weshenstein Castle. I think you're onto something, Jack said. Connor, do you remember the night we followed the masked man to the witches' brew? The witches were meeting because they were afraid they'd get blamed for the missing children. They were paranoid a witch hunt was coming. It's very likely they began plotting to take over the fairy tale world as a way to protect themselves. Then the masked man invaded the literary army, Goldilocks said. The witches probably kidnapped Emmerich so they would have leverage against your uncle, so maybe they planned to use Alex as leverage against us. Of course the witches are up to some vile scheme, Red said. I mean, they're witches, hello. I wouldn't be surprised if that goat who took Charlie had something to do with it. The Lost Boys and I found the missing children in her basement. Mariana probably kidnapped them to purposely stir up a paranoia in the witch community so they'd have a reason to plot a takeover. I bet she's behind the whole thing. Everyone froze and looked at Red in shock. If she was correct, it was a little unsettling how easy it was for her to figure out Mariana's intentions. Don't look at me like that, Red said. It takes a conniving genius to know a conniving genius. Obviously, there's a type of woman Charlie is attracted to. How could the witches know we're planning to defeat the literary army? How do they know we're a threat, Connor asked. Bree looked at him like the answer was obvious. Connor, they figured out Emmerich was your cousin before you or your uncle did. She reminded him, I'm sure it wouldn't be hard for a witch to look into a crystal ball and figure out what we were doing with a bunch of interdimensional beings inside of a children's hospital. Unfortunately, it made sense. A witch could easily have crossed into the other world and snuck into the hospital without being detected. They could have used magic to overpower Alex and take her back to the fairy tale world as a hostage. Connor had prayed for a clear answer all week, but he'd never guessed how much it would complicate matters. Let's lay everything out on the table before we go any further, he said. Which table? The Tin Woodman asked. Also a figure of speech, Connor said. Not only do we have to liberate the fairy tale world from the scariest villains in literature and slay a mythological creature before it turns us all into stone, but we also have to defeat an evil coven of witches before they use my sister against us. All the characters in the commissary shared glances with wide, timid eyes. The Blissworm cheered. It couldn't wait for the battle to begin. I know what you're thinking, Connor said. This is a much different fight than you signed up for. If the witches are involved, then we're easily outnumbered, especially if they have my sister. I was confident we could defeat the literary army, but I'm not sure if we can win the war. Connor rubbed his hands together, desperately trying to think of a way to get the odds back in their favor. Jack had a seat beside him and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. For once, I'm with the Blissworm, Jack said. We've seen a lot of scary situations over the years, and we've always gotten through them. Yes, there were many times when little of your sister's magic went a long way, but we would have never pulled through if it weren't for both of you. Now look around, Connor. You're surrounded by an army of your imagination. That means there's a piece of you inside of each and every one of them, and even if it's just a fraction of your bravery, your aptitude, or even your wit, I know these guys won't stand a chance against us. It was the exact pep talk Connor needed to hear, and it also inspired all the characters in the commissary. Jack's words made even the pirates of Starboardia look up from the television for the first time in days. It'll be dangerous, Connor said. We love danger, the Lost Boy shouted. Some of us may get hurt, Connor added. Speak for yourself, the Cyborg Queen said. I can just adjust feelings in settings. And regardless of what happens, at the end of the day, we'll all be heroes, Bolt said, and flipped through the air. Connor couldn't help but smile at his character's willingness to help him. He never thought his own creations would inspire him so much. All right, he said. It's going to be a challenge, but we can do this. Tomorrow morning, we're going to go to the fairy tale world, and we're going to kick some literary, mythological, witchy butt. All the characters cheered. The Blissworm was happy they were finally on the same page. Did you hear that, men? Robin Hood said. We're on the eve of war. We shall follow the sorcerer violently through battle and will be showered with riches after our victory. Robin, no one is getting paid, Connor said. Oh, Robin Hood said, then we shall be showered with compliments for our good intentions. After all, praise is the currency of the brave. Suddenly the doors opened and Bob and Charlotte rushed into the commissary. They were flushed and out of breath as if they had run the whole way there. A moment later, Trobella entered behind them. They had moved so fast she couldn't keep up. Mom, I've got good news and bad news, Connor said. The bad news is Jack and Red didn't find Alex, but the good news is, we know where your sister is, Charlotte panted. Connor couldn't believe his ears. You what? Turn on the news, Bob told the pirates. Channel 4, hurry! But Ricky just let Lucy perform at his club, Auburn Sally said. Change the channel, the entire room yelled in unison. The pirates reluctantly changed the channel and everyone gathered around the television to watch the news. A reporter appeared on the screen, broadcasting live from somewhere in New York City. I am standing on the corner of 39th Street and 5th Avenue in Manhattan, where police have stopped all vehicles and pedestrians from going any farther, the reporter said. The NYPD are preventing everyone from entering a 2-block radius around the main branch of the New York Public Library. Police officials have yet to say what the reason is for such precautions, but one thing is certain, something dangerous is happening in the library. The news station played shaky footage from a helicopter flying over the library. It was difficult to see anything except the red and blue police lights surrounding the building on all sides. This isn't the first peculiar incident in the area this week, the reporter continued. As I mentioned earlier, just a few days ago, the wreckage of the bathroom mysteriously appeared in the middle of Bryant Park, just behind the library. The dumpsters have yet to be identified. Did she just say they discovered a bathroom? Connor asked. We rushed you here as soon as we heard, Charlotte said. We just learned police have begun evacuating all the residents in the area as well, the reporter said. As I said, very little information has been shared at this time, but according to eyewitness reports, the iconic lion statues at the library's entrance have been vandalized. The helicopter's footage showed a close-up of the library's sprawling front steps. Once the camera refocused, everyone could see that the lion statues were absent from their perches. Instead, they could be seen standing in front of the library's entrance, as if the beasts were guarding the front door. For a split second, it almost looked like the statues were moving. Did you just see that? The reporter asked. It appears the statues are being manipulated somehow. The one on the right looks like it's growling at the approaching police. Oh my! The lion statue has just knocked the officer to the ground. The police are retreating. I have never seen anything like this. If I didn't know any better, I say we were witnessing magic. Connor went pale and looked at his friends in disbelief. Oh my gosh, he said, we've got to get to New York City. And that is the end of the chapter. The next chapter is called Chapter 3, The Frog in the Mirror. I'll see you guys then.